All the cool kids have at least one. Crosscut sleighs. Sleds. Crosscut sleds. There are almost as many different styles and shapes and sizes as there are personalities of woodworkers. Some of them pretty complex, some of them very simple. But they all have the same basic anatomy. You start with a bottom, and it'll have two rails on the bottom that are the same size as the slots on your table saw, usually made out of hardwood. Then there's the front fence. This has to be straight and square to the blade, because it's what your cutting piece will ride against. And then there's the back fence. So let's build a basic table saw sled. I've got this piece of plywood and a little piece of poplar that I'm going to use. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut down some scrap plywood that I have to make a fence out of. I'm going to laminate two pieces together, and I'm going to do that twice, one for the front fence, one for the back fence. And I use that brown paper to put in between them so I can glue them up together without them sticking together. And that's mostly because my clamp collection is pitiful. So I thought I'd try to use the calipers to measure the slots in the table saw, which are exactly 3/4 of an inch, and then use those same calipers to try to adjust the blade to see how close I could get. And first try, I got them exactly right. Now they're a little proud at the top of the table saw, so I ran them through the thickness planer several times. Made a big mess. To get those down, they have to be just below the top of the table saw. That's perfect. I'm going to take these pennies, or you can use washers, and I'm going to put them in the slots. And then when the rails go inside of those slots, they're again going to sit proud of the top of the table saw, and this is so we can glue them to the bottom of the table saw sled. Now we're just above the top. That's perfect. Put just a little bit of glue on them. And I'm going to use the fence to keep that bottom sort of square and put some weight on it. Let it dry. Now once it's dry, I'm going to pre-drill and put some screws in those bottom rails so they never ever come off by accident. Now when you put those screws in, most likely it's going to push the wood out just a little bit on those rails and make the fit too tight in the slots of your table saw. Just like that. So what you can do is get a block and some sandpaper, and you can sand those down little by little until they fit inside those slots again. You don't want them to be loose to where it moves around, but you want it to be loose enough that the sled will slide easily. Once my fence was dry, pulled it apart, and I ran it through the table saw, just cutting off 1/8 of an inch or so off of each side just to clean those edges up. I pre-drilled the back fence because it doesn't have to be square, and screwed it in. And I messed up on cutting the front fence, trying to cut this fancy shape in it, so kind of had to improvise and create this piece and do a little glue up. Just pretend like it's all one piece and nobody will ever know. Why this shape? Why do people cut their crosscut sled fences high in the center and lower on the outside? And it really comes down to weight. When you put it all together, the bulkier it is, the heavier it is, and it gets cumbersome to heft and try to store and put on the saw. And it's just a way to streamline it and cut a little bit of weight off of it. It has to be high in the center because this is where the blade's going to run, and it has to be contiguous all the way across because this holds the sled together horizontally. When you run the blade through it, the bottom is cut in half. So that's why the shape. So once that was dry, took the clamps off, sanded it down a little bit. One take. Wanted to round over the corners just to make the thing as comfortable as possible. And run it through the router just to round those edges again for comfort. Now I'm going to pre-drill all the holes. This fence has to be square to the blade. So I'm going to put one screw in the corner of it so it'll rotate, and I can adjust it then. Now there is the 5-cut method of squaring, and it involves making 5 cuts and then doing some math based on the length of your board and how far off the angle is and measuring, and I'm not going to do that. You can look it up and do it yourself. It makes very precise cuts, but I'm going to put a square up against the blade and my fence, and I'm going to call it close enough. But after I did that, hey, look at that, square. That'll work. This is just paste wax, and I'm going to put a generous amount on the rails and go ahead and do the whole bottom of the sled, and this just helps it slide better on the saw. And I thought while I'm at it, I might as well do the whole table saw top, because it needed it. But here's how well it worked. That was close. So here's a scary thing. That comes right out of the back of that thing. And if you're not paying any attention, you kind of forget that it's going to come out of there and you put your hands there. Yeah, nobody wants that. So a lot of people will take some sort of block or box or structure that they put on the back of the table saw sled that has two purposes, really. It covers where the blade's going to come out so you don't see it. It doesn't come all the way through if you don't push it all the way through. And it also reminds you not to put your hands there. There are many other things you can do to a table saw sled. Some people put T-track on them, some people put clamps, hold downs, stop blocks. There's all kinds of things, and there's probably a million different videos on YouTube of people building table saw sleds in different ways. This is a basic one just to show the anatomy of it, and it's also very functional. I happen to need it for a project, which is why I built it. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully it gave you some information. Thanks for watching.